David 5, go ahead.
When you're on patrol at night and you see something like this, what do you think?
Stop the city mark, 10-4.
That's right. There's a good chance that driver is DWI, driving while intoxicated. Certain things drivers do, certain cues like weaving, alert you to the possibility of DWI. But of course he could be weaving because he's tired or having trouble with the car. So from your experience, what are the chances he is DWI? 100 out of 100? 50 out of 100? 10 out of 100? It's hard to say, isn't it? But now we can say. Statistically, when you see weaving at night, 60 times out of 100, you're looking at someone DWI, someone with a blood alcohol concentration of at least 0.10. In fact, for the first time, we can see all of the main cues we normally associate with DWI and say with confidence what the chances are the person driving is DWI. And we can do it now because the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration contracted with a company called Anacapa Sciences to find out. They interviewed hundreds of officers. They analyzed over 1,000 arrest reports throughout the U.S. And they came up with 113 different driving behaviors related to DWI. Then they went out on nighttime patrol and they matched driving behaviors with the blood alcohol concentration of the drivers. And they found out they could reduce that list down to 20 and still account for over 90% of what you see and think of as possible driving while intoxicated. Now you're looking at those 20 cues right now. Look familiar? By the way, just to let you know how confident we are that these are the 20 best cues, they were put on a small card called a DWI detection guide, and they were given to hundreds of officers throughout the U.S. Now, after 4,000 stops, regardless of location, roadway, age or sex of the driver, city or country, the card was almost always right. For example, just as we know that 60 times out of 100, weaving in a regular pattern indicates DWI, when you see someone drifting within a lane or across lanes, what are the chances he has a blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, of at least 0.10? The answer is 50. 50 times out of 100, he's DWI. Now, if he was drifting and then compensated abruptly at the last second, in other words, if he was swerving, we now know that chances are 55 times out of 100, he's DWI. How about turning with a wide radius? He starts out wide, cuts the corner close, and ends up wide. Well, he's really worth looking at, because 65 times out of 100, he's drunk. Now here's another one we've all seen before. The tires are remaining consistently on that center line, or they could be consistently on one of the lane markers. Now we've got his number too. He's a 45. 45 times out of 100, he's DWI. Of course, as you well know, if he's straddling the center line or a lane marker, that's much worse, and his number's going to reflect it. He's a 65. In this case, as with the cues you've seen so far, alcohol is probably affecting his steering ability. But alcohol has other effects too, doesn't it? For example, in this film, everyone has their lights off because it's daytime. But when you see a car with the headlights off at night, 30 times out of 100, he's DWI simply because he's concentrating on driving and he isn't really aware of what's going on around him. Now, the same thing would be true if he was signaling in a way that was inconsistent with his driving actions. Though you can't see it very well, he signaled left and he turned right. And we know he's a 40. And if he has a slow response to a traffic signal, that's always made you suspicious in the past. But now we also know he's a 40. Here's one that's a 60, and he isn't doing anything. His face is close to the windshield, his eyes are fixed, wide open, and they look like a pair of fried eggs. He just appears to you to be drunk. And 60 times out of 100, he is. Now, if he takes off and accelerates or decelerates faster than he has to for the traffic conditions, or if he alternates speeding up and slowing down, you've got a 30. As you well know, when you're dealing with DWI, seeing more than one cue happens all the time. But what we now know statistically is that if you add 10 points to the cue with the highest number, that's what the chances are that this driver is DWI. He appeared drunk, and that's a 60. The other cue was only a 30. We add 10 to 60, and we now know this driver will be DWI 70 times out of 100, which is just a scientific way of saying what you already know. When you see more than one cue, it means more. By the way, what does it mean when someone is braking erratically, or in this case, riding the brakes? First of all, it means that 45 times out of 100, he has a BAC of at least 0.10. But just as with speeding up and slowing down, alcohol has impaired his ability to control the speed of the car. Now, here's another example of that. By the time he came to a stop, he had stopped inappropriately. In other words, on top of the crosswalk. And we now know that's a 35. Another example of stopping inappropriately is this one. He stops for a green light. Obviously, what's happened here is that alcohol has impaired his ability to process information. The same thing can cause stopping without cause in a traffic lane. As you know, we don't see this very often. But when you do, 50 times out of 100, he's drunk. And 50 times out of 100, if he's dawdling or poking along slower than 10 miles an hour below the limit, he's drunk too. What about following too closely? You already know it's a good indicator of DWI. But how good is it? Now remember, as with all of these cues, we're only talking about nighttime patrol. If you guessed 50-50, you were right. Okay? How about turning abruptly or illegally, like turning sharply from the wrong lane? Statistically, it's a good indicator, but it's not at the top. It's a 35. Driving into opposing traffic, like going the wrong way on a one-way street, or driving into crossing traffic, is a little higher. He's a 45. And this guy's a 55. Whether he's going straight through turn-only lanes or driving on the shoulder, anytime he's driving on other than the designated roadway, 55 times out of 100, he's had a little too much. Now, if he almost strikes an object or a vehicle, he's a 60. And since he's piling up multiple cues, he's really a 70, isn't he? Now, maybe you know all that. Maybe you're really good at guessing the chances a driver is drunk or sober just by what you saw him do. But now, you don't even have to guess.